Hello, hello to everyone, wherever you are, whether you're going to watch us live, whether you're going to watch the replay. Today, we are at the Author's Corner, part of the Own It platform, and I have a fellow author with me, Dr. Durain. And what we're talking about today is inspiration. What inspires you to write? Do you just come up with an idea? Is it a passion? What really is it? And I'll briefly introduce myself and give my quick inspirational story, and then I'll hear from Dr. Durain. So I'm Teresa Palmer. I'm a holistic cardiology nurse practitioner. And for over 2 decades, I've been connecting individuals to their hearts, my patients. What I mean by that is getting the heart and brain on the same page. Now, I had this idea for 3 decades about writing a book, but I never really did because I never felt the time was right. I was in a private practice and I was using all the elements of what I would have written in a book with my patients. So I was always bridging the traditional Western cardiology with some of the Eastern holistic practices, some spirituality, some metaphysics. And when 2020 hit, I call it the year of uncertainty. What happened was my patients, all of them, we were open the entire time. My patients needed the information, and they also needed to take care of themselves because we were uncertain of what was going on. I'll be honest, healthcare providers did not have the answers. And I took it upon myself to make sure that my patients had the information and the tools they needed to care for themselves. Well, one day a patient said to me, "You give out all this great information you always have. Why don't you put it in a book so that it goes beyond the practice, beyond our cardiology practice?" Because she thought that the book could help a lot of people. Well, I really took that to heart. And I thought, yes, I have the information. I've wanted to do this. The time is right. Because in 2020, we did learn that it's important to be able to take care of yourself, to have self care, to be self aware, and to look more to ourselves for the answers rather than to outside ourselves. So I wrote the book. It got published very quickly by Balboa Press. And initially, the book was called Finding Sanctuary in the Pandemic Age. Well, I wrote a book proposal for a traditional publisher who said, no way with that title. So they said, you need a different title. The pandemic's going to be over, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I changed it to Heal Your Heart from Within, and that's where it is now. So my inspiration was to help my patients, something I had been doing, and then to bring that message to a more global audience. So, with that said, I'm going to go to Dr. Durain. By the way, my book is called Heal Your Heart from Within. It's on Amazon, Balboa Press, Books a Million, and Barnes and Noble. So, with that, I will go over to Dr. Durain to hear her story and insights.
Good morning and welcome, welcome, welcome. I am blessed to be here this morning. Thank you, Teresa, for having me. Um, I am Dr. Durain Irvin, also Pastor Durain Irvin. I am the CEO of 3-in-1 Ministries and Genesis Innovations, and I am excited to be here with you this morning. I am an international speaker and an Amazon #1 best-selling author, so I'm excited about that. My inspiration, first and foremost, comes from God, and that is to be used as a vessel of God to encourage people, to uplift people, to allow my books to be a pathway for people to use to maximize their fullest potential and to become all that God has ordained them to be. My inspiration also comes from being an educator for 41 years. Honey, child, I could tell y'all some stories and I could share some experiences in that manner, and I do. I'm also a Christian comedian, and I have a segment that, not that I copied off of Tyler Perry of a Diary of a Mad Black Woman, but it's called The Diary of a Mad Black Principal. And I share some wonderful insights that will make you laugh, but also will make you think about the relationship that you have with the school. So, in coming from the education standpoint, my desire is to allow you to see that the school is like a triangle: the school environment, the school relationship. You have the student at the top of the triangle, you have the parent and the home and relatives on one end, and then you have the school on the other end. But like that triangle, it's never ending. So those three entities have to work together. I call them the trinity of the schools. So that's one aspect of inspiration. And another aspect of inspiration that I have is I have the heart for women. No offense, men, but for single mothers, because oftentimes it is a great struggle. I've been married, I've been divorced, I've been a single mother. And to see someone who has walked that path and who God has blessed to overcome those obstacles, not only for myself, but also for my children, I am inspired to write to women to encourage them that they are fearfully and wonderfully made, and they're not defined by whether they're married, unmarried, single, widowed, divorced, whatever the situation is. We are defined by who God says we are. And so that's what my first book was about. And it was entitled, I Am Royalty. I am who God says I am. And it took women through a journal of a journey to reach their affirmation, confirmation, and transformation of who God said they were. The bottom line is we are blessed to be a blessing to others. So our life is an inspiration to others to show them, yes, it doesn't matter where you come from. It only matters where you're going. And God has the ability to lead, God, and direct your path, because He says, the Lord declares, I know the plans I have for you, plans for you to prosper, plans to give you hope in the future. And I believe that God has called me as an author to be a vessel of hope, to help all individuals get to their ordained destiny, that future that God has for them.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. And you said something about moving forward, and I'd like to elaborate a little bit on that and go in a little bit of a direction with that as far as authorship. So, when you go to write a book, like I said, I had everything for 30 years and I had information. I had been doing this in my practice. So, it wasn't, once I decided to write the book, I already had the idea, I already had the information, I already had the tools. So the only thing that was left for me at that point was to look at other books on the bookshelves and to see where my book would fit in. You know, are there already too many books on that subject? If so, how is my book a little different? How is my book going to help some people? If not, where does my book fit in? And if there isn't really a place, which I always believe there is a place, but if you're really struggling with that, do you go ahead, move forward, and write the book anyway, and hope that you get an audience and get the message out there? Or do you kind of rethink everything? Do you start with an outline? Do you write a book proposal? And I think both of those things are very important. I'm not that fond of outlines. I'm not really that good at them. I've done a few book proposals, which really kind of gels why you're writing the book, you know, what your message is. Why are you the person that's able to write that book? What about you is the expertise that you're writing that book for? You know, if you're a banker and you're writing a book about organic food, why are you the expert on organic food? What in your background, what in your experience lends to that? And that's how your biography would be for the book, because being a banker has nothing to do with eating organically. So I know I'm going a little off track here, but I think, you know, how do you move forward and how do you get these not only get the ideas, but when you decide it, do you make a formal outline? Do you do a proposal for it, or do you sit down and just write the book? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Dr. Durain.
Honestly, I've never written an outline for my book. I normally have a theme or a subject, and I write to that. For example, in the three anthologies that I've written In His Presence, Faith, Hope, and Love, and Refreshed, they all focus on those, on the title of the book. And then when I looked at the title, I prayed about how that impacted my life. For example, In His Presence, I shared how God brought me through certain situations. Faith, hope, and love, that was easy. Each paragraph was literally about the faith that walked me through various situations in my life, how I depended on the hope and that my hope was placed in God. And then the love of God that He has showered upon me and with the people of God. And then when I wrote Refreshed, I went through a very dark period in my life and I wrote about how God refreshed me and brought me through it. He brought me by rivers of living waters that just literally poured into me as I was going through various situations. So for me, my my writing is normally birthed out of situations that I'm going through that I believe many women are going through, and that my journey can also be an encouragement to them. Sometimes, we think we're the only person who has gone through this. So then when we read that not only that someone else has gone through it, but someone else has been delivered from it. I'm in the process of writing a book about my life, and it's called From Welfare to Faring Well. And it starts with my journey and being born and raised in South Philadelphia and on welfare to where God has brought me to not only be the CEO of my company, but literally the CEO of my own school. Because when you're a principal of a school, you have a $5 to $7 million budget and you are considered the CEO. So through the journeys that I went through to get from South Philadelphia to where I am today, I share that not to brag, or as one person said, not to be braggadocious, but as an encouragement to women that if God took me off of welfare, from welfare literally to faring well, that God can do the same thing for you. So everything that I write is a source of encouragement. I believe I have the gift of exhortation, which is the gift of encouraging people, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, mentally, or physically, that they can be better than where they are. And that God has a plan for them. The word of God says, your latter shall be greater than your former. And I believe that. We can start one place, but that's just the beginning of our story. God has an entire journey for us, and each step in our life can be a different chapter in the book. I honestly believe anyone can write a book because when you look at your life and it's an encouragement to someone, if it encourages you to be better, it will encourage someone else because someone else has gone through the exact same thing that you have to do. It's just a question of putting the words on the paper. And as you start to write, it will just begin to flow. God will bring back things, and you're like, oh man, I forgot about that. Let me put that in there. And it just amazes me that literally God took me back to Arthur Elementary School. I went there during their preschool program. And the only thing I can remember is I loved their ginger snaps and their apple juice. But that was for me, I guess that must have been significant because that's what I remember from preschool going through Arthur Elementary School in South Philadelphia on Christian Street. I was like, God, you took me way back. And so I just shared that little blurb. And to this day, I still love ginger snaps.
Oh, geez, that's a good story. I enjoy that. And really, what you're saying is that when we do write, we have a purpose for writing.
Yes.
And whether I think sometimes whether we know it at the time or we don't, um, we there is that purpose there, and I think with anything that we write, it's that message that needs to get out. So when you're writing about something that happened or a self memoir, it really becomes a teaching memoir because you're giving people the tools, you're giving them the understanding of how they can help themselves. So I think it always starts with identifying a specific problem. And for me, the specific problem was that we don't really, I shouldn't say no, but it's difficult to take care of ourselves because we didn't really have, or we don't really have the self awareness of ourselves to be able to know exactly what we need in relationship to our health, and that's physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So for me, the problem identified was a lack of self awareness, which leads to a lack of self care, which is in cardiology why heart disease has remained the number one cause of death in the United States, fifth worldwide, despite all the resources and the education that's out there. I mean, millions upon millions have been spent on educating people. But if you don't know what you need and you're not connected to yourself, that's not going to do you a whole world of good. And that was my purpose for writing the book, was to give people the knowledge and the tools that they needed to be successful in understanding why it's important to take care of themselves and to be able to perform the self-care, to do the self-care. So it's always that message. And I think sometimes what stops people from writing is they don't know what the message is. Like they may say, "Oh, I
Mm,
want to write." Okay, but what's your message? You know, in an anthology, you have your own message, but they kind of give you the format.
yes.
If it's a book about self empowerment, say, you're not going to write about cooking unless you could somehow put the process of cooking and what it means to make a meal into self empowerment. So, regardless of what you're writing, I think the first step for people is to acknowledge number one, that they want to write. They may be called to
Mm.
write. And number two, why do you want to write? What do you identify as a challenge or a problem? What do you see as a challenge for people out there? And how could you help them overcome that challenge? Either what in your professional life, your education, your personal experience, what has gotten good results for you? And then how could you give that to other people? So I think that's really the basis for why we're called to write. And I think sometimes we just need to sit down to kind of take the time to figure out, what is our message? What do we hope to accomplish? What are we trying to say with the book? I remember probably now about 10 years ago, I did an online Toastmasters. I've been a Toastmaster for 20 years. I have my distinguished Toastmaster. I've done quite a bit of public speaking and professional speaking. And somebody wrote a book. And I asked them, I said, "Oh, why'd you write the book?" And you know what the person said to me? "Because I can."
Oh, okay.
And I thought, okay, um, there's really, I said, "Well, what's your message? Like, what did you give to the people?" "Oh, I just wanted to write a book. That's why I wrote the book." And this person had no idea why they wrote the book. Not that you have to be successful, but this person had a great deal of trouble and difficulty, and then trying to promote the book, trying to talk about the book, um, because they didn't know why they wrote the book. And it was just a case of, okay, I could write a book, I could self publish, this is what I'm doing. So I think we really need to go deeper than that. We need to really
Absolutely.
know what our message is, and how can we impact people? So what do you think of that?
First of all, I appreciate your book because your book will save lives. If we take what you've given us in your book and apply it to our lives, we will live longer. So I appreciate your area of
Okay.
expertise. Teresa, my book comes out of my mess, point blank. I'm just going to be clear. My
Yeah.
mess, which becomes a message, the various tests that God has put me through that literally has become a testimony. And that is the purpose of my book. I had no desire to be a writer whatsoever. And at 62, God birthed an author through me. And it was through COVID, where God had showed me that there were so many women, of course, through my church and various friendships, that were already struggling before COVID. The isolation of COVID made it even worse. So my book was an encouragement to those women. And it came out of the experiences that I had as a single woman and the isolation that I felt at times. Just feeling, well, let me say this. When you look at the statistics, and they put out statistics and says, if you're a single parent and you have children, they literally put a number on how valuable you are or how you should be valued or what you're going to have to offer. I had a teacher tell me the only thing I had to look forward to being born and raised in South Philadelphia was being pregnant on welfare. I know that devil is a liar, because that is not my story. So because there are a lot of statistics that come out, my desire was to break every statistic that they threw at me. I broke it intentionally because I wanted people to understand nobody defines you but God. I didn't know it was going to go in the book. I had no idea. I just thought I was my job was just to dispel every myth that they had about single parents. I came from a single parent. So my desire was to just break every myth. I had no intention of putting it in the book. I just wanted to go against what what they felt was the norm. If it was the norm, I was going to break it and show you that it wasn't. And I guess that was my radical spirit. And then God just used that for me to be an encouragement to women who are single parents, who may be struggling, that you are not defined but what statistics say. They have their place and we appreciate them, but they don't define you. You define you. God defines you. And if God has a different story for you, report will you believe? I'm going to believe the report of the Lord. It literally is that simple.
I appreciate that. So you really sat down without really a plan to write, felt called to write, and then wrote literally like your experience, what was on your mind, what you wanted people to know. So, yes, you did have a message, you did have a plan, but you didn't put it down before you started to write the book. So you wrote, and that's great. And that's an encouragement for other people out there that you don't always have to have a plan. You may have a calling and don't understand what you're being called to do. And maybe one day you do sit down, you take a pen and paper, you start jotting things down, jot down some of your experiences, jot down what has helped you, encouragement, and then once it goes down on paper, look at it and then create a book from it. Sometimes books are created through journals where people
Yes.
keep a private journal and then they go back over that journal and that journal becomes a book for them. And that's another very inspiring way to write a book. So, even though it's good to have a plan, it's always good to have a plan, regardless of what it is, whether it's a plan for your day, a plan for where you live, some sort of plan, because we do need that structure. But at the same time, there's nothing that doesn't say that you can't sit down. And it's always best to use a pen and paper rather than a computer, because when you're actually physically writing, putting your hand, that's really getting your whole body, your mind, your spirit working. When you do it on a computer, it's a little bit more artificial. So I would recommend to people to take that pen, take that notebook or that journal, start writing, and see what you come up with. There's always something. And if you're called to write, you may not even realize it until you start to journal, you start to doodle on a pad, you start to write down some ideas and see where that leads you. Because, like you said, everybody could write. I don't think there's a person out there that can't write. And if you really feel that you can't get the words, that you're just not called to put it down on paper and called to do that, you could get a ghostwriter, and that ghostwriter takes your ideas. You literally format what you want to say and you tell them, and then they write it for you. They write it in your voice, your experience, and then you review everything before it would even go to print. So even if you really don't think you have the skills for whatever reason to write something, somebody else could always do it for you. So with that said, any last words for our listeners and the Own It family, Dr. Doreen?
I just want to encourage each of you to, as Teresa said, start journaling, write your story. And then sometimes if you can see it in print, then that will encourage you to write it so someone else can be encouraged by what you've already been through. And it has no number. Remember, God called me to be a CEO of my ministry at the age of 60. At 62, he called me as an author, and at 65, he called me to get my doctorate. So there is no age limit. Don't let nobody tell you you're too old, and don't let them tell you you're too young. I know an 8-year-old writer who is a published author, and her book is encouraging children at the elementary level. Open your mind, explore, think beyond. Be like JPAS. Ask God to enlarge your territories so that you can share your wonderful story. Just a book away. God bless you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening, for being a part of the Own It subscribership to our magazines, and for the encouragement that our readers and our subscribers and our listeners also give us. And I hope this helps you to know that age is but a number. You could do anything at any age. And sit down, try today. Sit down, grab that paper, grab that doodle pad, or grab that notebook, and just jot down some things. Jot down a little bit about your experience, a little bit about what's going on and how you think that you could help or inspire somebody else, and then see where that goes. Take that and see where that goes. So until next week, thank you, everyone, and have a great, whether it's morning, noon, night, or the next day in some parts of the world, have a great day wherever you are, and we appreciate you so much. Thank you so much.
Blessed.